Welcome everyone to our Industry Insights, Biotech in Our Backyard. My name is Rosie Gallant and I will be one of your co-hosts today. I am with the Career Connections Center and I'm excited to be a part of this very important conversation today for you all to learn about and hear from Clark alumni and Clark students about opportunities in the biotech space. So, as I continue to let students in here, you might hear that chime pop up a couple of times. In terms of, so from the Career Connections Center, you might have interacted with us before, you might be meeting with us soon, but I'm here to help you explore different opportunities and let you know that we are here to support you as you enter your spring semester and maybe you're exploring your internship search, maybe you're conducting a job search. And we have lots of awesome events coming up that you can find on Handshake. We have events coming up around the job and internship search. So if you need help with that, and especially the job and internship search during COVID-19, we have opportunity funding sessions coming up. So if you're looking for funding for an internship you might be taking, and we have Career Center drop-in hours now every Tuesday and Thursday. So perhaps you might hear something in today's conversation that you want to dive deeper into or learn more about and explore, and you can connect with us on that. I will be here behind the chat, so I'll be listening for opportunities to maybe drop some links to resources that you can explore in the chat, and I will also be here to be responsive on questions that you might have while the panel and the discussion is happening. So with that, I have the pleasure of kicking us off here. I will introduce Professor La Rochelle so that he can get us kicked off and introduced to the panelists.
Great, well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad you're here for this event. You know, if you know anything about the biotech world, sort of Cambridge and Kendall Square is, sometimes considered the mecca of biotech, but there's so much going on right here in the greater Worcester area. So I'm really happy to share some of that with you, and we're going to hear about that today, and hopefully this will provide some opportunities for you moving forward as you think about your own careers and things you can get involved in. I'm hoping to do as little talking as possible during this event, so I really want to hear from our panelists, and I also like to hear from you all. So rather than holding your questions to the end, if you have questions as things come up, then please, by all means, you can either enter them into the chat room or raise your hand. We'll be monitoring that, and or you can just unmute yourself and ask the questions. But I want you to feel that this is very much an interactive event this afternoon, and it's really for you. So if you have questions, don't hold back at all. We are having the world premiere of a Elena Ivanova original video highlighting her experience as an intern in one of the companies here in Worcester. So we're going to start off with that short video. But before we get to that, I'd like our panelists to just give a brief introduction so you all know who they are, and then we'll move ahead with the program. So Elena, maybe you can start.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Elena, and I'm a current Clarkey and hopeful 2022 graduate in the BCMB program.
Okay, Kringle, you want to?
Sure. Hello, I'm Kringle Daly. I graduated in 2010 from Clark with a PhD in physics. If anyone has seen them, those little radio telescope looking things that are on the roof of the physics building and one might still be on the ground, I actually helped start that whole project off. And now I have founded a biotech here in Worcester, and we are starting to gene edit plants.
Okay, Zhu.
Hey everyone, I'm Zhu Shen, class of 2004. I was also a BCMB major like Elena. My current role is Vice President of Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives. We are a life sciences incubator, and we help provide the basic ingredients for a startup company such as Kringle's to be able to launch their products and bring their products to the patients. That's our goal.
Great, thanks. So we're going to kick off with Elena's video. It's a little over 4 minutes. I think you'll find it entertaining and interesting. She did a fantastic job with it, and then we'll continue on from there. But again, I really want to encourage you, if you have questions as we move forward, don't hold back. Let's make this as much of a dialogue as possible. So Rosie, if you want to get the video going.
I'm actually going to go ahead and share it right now. Yep,
Okay.
no problem.
Yeah.
All right, so without further ado, I apologize for the second introduction.
Hi everyone, my name is Elena, and I'm a junior here at Clark University, majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology. I'm also an interning research assistant at Zata Pharmaceuticals right here in Worcester. I want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about my internship experience and also tell you why I think doing an internship while you're still in school might be one of the best things you can do to advance your career in science. So if that sounds interesting, why don't you join me at the lab? So here we are in the lab. Over the last 2 years, I have had the opportunity to learn from and be a part of the research team here at Zata Pharmaceuticals. Our goal as a company is to develop therapies for the most pressing health challenges of our local and global communities. Currently, we're working on a project aimed at developing a robust pathogen inactivation system focused on blood purification and vaccine development.
At the core of the system are Zata's novel pathogen inactivators. These are small molecules that have the ability to penetrate all types of pathogens. Once inside, they selectively bind to and cross-link the pathogenic nucleic acids, preventing further replication. What is unique about Zata's pathogen inactivators is that their selectivity for nucleic acids ensures low protein interaction, thereby preserving the integrity of non-target cells and cellular components.
But the internship is not all about hard science. The most valuable lessons might actually be in the space between the hard science and the people involved. For example, working on a multidisciplinary team teaches you how to plan experiments, discuss results, and evaluate problems with team members from different fields of expertise who are committed to the same project. Also, the internship provides opportunities to explore. Just because you joined the team as, say, a microbiology intern doesn't mean that that is all you will learn. There are a lot of moving parts in research and development. You might find yourself branching off into cell culture or analytical chemistry. Maybe a grant needs proofreading, or you need to help present at a conference. The opportunities are many, and you just might discover what you are most passionate about in the process. Which leads me to the next point, finding your role on a team. Are you the creative type? Do you excel at planning? Are you quick to notice problems and suggest improvements? Or do you shine when presenting your findings to a bigger group? Discovering what you do best as part of a team allows you to embrace your weaknesses while harnessing your strengths, and this is an invaluable lesson. But maybe the most important aspect of the internship is the opportunity to meet other like-minded people who have your best interest in mind. The internship may only last the summer, but the connections you make may last you a lifetime. Be open to connection, and remember, you can never have too many mentors. I hope you enjoyed my brief presentation. I look forward to our conversation. And don't forget to apply for internships starting now for this summer. Bye for now, see you around, and good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Great. There's a lot of great information in there, not least of which, a lot of what you might learn in an internship goes far beyond the hard science that you might participate in. So things, soft skills, grant writing and networking is a very important one. So I think, Elena did a great job of highlighting some of these things in addition to the science you might participate in, and great reasons for seeking out these internships. So thank you, Elena, for the hard work you put into creating that video. I think you really did a great job of highlighting the importance of seeking out these and participating in these kind of opportunities. What we're going to do now is shift gears to have Zhu Shen talk a little bit about his path to where he is now, because it's not necessarily something you might consider has a target for a career in science, but he's very much involved in the science, but from a different end than being at the bench. And so it'd be great to hear how he got there. And then he's also going to teach us a little bit about the science that's going on right here in our own backyard in Worcester, because it's really quite exceptional. So with that, Zhu, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks very much. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Great.
Great. Yeah, so just want to go over a brief, hold on a second, a little technical difficulty. So a little bit about my journey to Worcester. I was born in Shanghai, China. I arrived in the country in the US when I was about 7 years old in Connecticut. I did my bachelor's at Clark, BCMB, class of 2004, finished my PhD at UMass Medical School, specializing in immunology and biochemistry in 2012. And then afterwards, I did a short postdoc and I became a scientist in a startup company. We incubated out both in Cambridge as well as at NBI. I did research and development for about 4 years with the degree that I had, with the training that I had. And 4 years into it, I decided to kind of shift gears and do something entirely different. I became a product manager in marketing, at Four Sigma. It was something totally outside of my comfort zone. I'd never done any marketing before. The first time they talked about margins, I thought they were talking about, cancer margins, to be honest with you, in chemotherapy, So that was really where I stood. But the transition I found to be enlightening, and also it was an opportunity for me to expand some of the soft skills, that Dr. LaRochelle has talked about. I did that for a year, and then I really found my home here, at Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives, MBI. We are a life science incubator. It's a lot like a CO2 incubator for cells. We're an organization that supplies the basic needs of a startup life science company. This includes lab bench space and some equipment access. Why do these organizations exist? Incubators exist really because early startup companies face a lot of challenges. In addition to the complex science, they are faced with challenges with investments. They have to wear many job functions. There's intellectual property costs to protect those. There's costs for lab space and their operations, timing issues, in managing scale up. So why is this important, and why are startup companies important? The reason why is because over the years, so if you look at this chart right here, if you look at and focus on the dark green, these are the percentage of new drugs that are approved by the FDA that were initially developed at a smaller biopharma company, at a startup company. And the reason why that is because large pharma has shifted to a model where the innovation is really started at the startup company level, and it's de-risked, and then a large pharmaceutical company is able to acquire that technology and expand that further. So these organizations, specifically within Roche, Johnson & Johnson, and Pfizer, these venture organizations exist predominantly to be able to evaluate startup company technologies, to be able to invest in them and then acquire them. So speaking a little bit about the region, we are lucky to be located in the most innovative supercluster in the world. There's currently 1,100 plus personalized, in traditional biopharmaceuticals being developed in the state of Massachusetts. And there's been 28% growth just in biomanufacturing employment in the past 10 years alone, and that's going to incline. That's going to increase very soon. So just very briefly, there's about 2,000 Massachusetts drug candidates being produced. That accounts for 12% of the U.S. pipeline and 6% of the global pipeline. So if you're looking for a job in biotech, Massachusetts is clearly the place to be. Additionally, if you look at the year-over-year growth, Massachusetts alone has grown 18% as compared to the previous year. Massachusetts is only second to California in total biotech jobs, despite being a fraction of the size as compared to California. And one thing I'll highlight, and everyone loves this, the average annual wage for a career in pharma is $169,000. $169,000. And unfortunately, that's not something that you get in academia. So, as Dr. Larochelle knows, so, I just want to, I like to start with a little bit of history for people as well. Does anyone know what this is? Anybody? Feel free to speak up, Kringle, if you know what this is. All right, so what it is Inovid was the original drug that was for birth control, also known as the pill. It was invented at the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology many years ago. And it was invented here in Worcester, importantly. So there was some overlap with Clark University as well. I think Dr. Hoagland had done some work over at Clark. But does anyone know what adalimumab is? I'm sure you guys have seen this ad on TV and by the more popular name. But the more popular name is Humira. So this was developed at AbbVie, formerly known as BASF rather, and it accounts for about $20 billion worth of annual sales from 2018 to 2020. It's the biggest drug to ever hit the market, and it was largely developed right here in the city. So if you're looking for career opportunities, there's nowhere, better to look than, right in your backyard. One other thing I'll just mention here is there's a 46-acre campus called the Reactory. It's a biomanufacturing park. And the reason why I bring this up is that, for everyone who's contemplating a career in science, if you think you need a master's degree or a PhD degree, you may not need that. I have a PhD degree. While I certainly do not, regret the skills and knowledge I've acquired over the years, I may have thought differently had I done internships, which I did not. I did, research throughout the whole time, just in academic setting. But in biomanufacturing itself, the requirements that are required in the process to manufacture a drug, a third of it, will fall on the shoulders of bachelor's degree candidates. A third of it will go on to master's. A third will go on to PhDs. So there's many job opportunities for everybody to go around. This 46-acre park, the first company coming into this park is Wuxi Biologics. They've broken ground in the facility. There's going to be 150 jobs. There's 6 other parcels in this park that are going to be built within the next 3 to 5 years, we imagine, if not sooner. And it's going to create hundreds of jobs for the city. So with that, I'll just leave I'll just leave everyone with this, choose a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. So that's my short little presentation. I'd be happy to share that with everyone on the call. And if anyone has any questions for me, feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. That's fantastic. I mean, how many of you knew so much was going on right here in Worcester? I mean, you just go across from downtown from here, and that's where a lot of these incubator companies are. It can be anywhere from like one small room to a bigger space. There's a whole variety, and just some fantastic opportunities awaiting you if you know how to get involved. And before we move on to Kringle, everybody's being so shy. I don't know. Do you have any questions for Zoo? I mean, obviously you can come back. We can circle back. But before we moved on, I wanted to see if there were anybody have any questions about biotech in Worcester or anything specific for Zoo about his path? Okay. We'll move on. Hopefully you'll come up with some questions as we move forward. So Kringle Daly was a Clark student, a physicist. The number of physicists that have made significant contributions to biology is just astounding. It's something you might not be aware of, but if you look at the history of molecular biology in particular, going way back to Salvador Lurie and others. These were all physicists that made incredible contributions. And so Kringle is in good company there. And with that, I'm going to let him talk a little bit about how he took his physics to the incubator company that he's in right now.
Score. Thank you, Professor. And as we go, feel free to interrupt me with questions or fire them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them on the fly and whatnot. So it's interesting, before this call started, the panelists were chatting and Professor La Rochelle brought up how there's not one direct path in biology. It could come from all sorts of different beginnings and end up all sorts of different endings. I might be a very good example of that because clearly I came from outside of biology and somehow ended up here and whatnot. And Alina's, in your video, you alluded to the same thing too, this idea of multidisciplinary. And it's a very interesting thing because, you know, as much as I hate to say it, the deeper you delve into one profession, you almost strap the horse blinders on harder. And maybe you become really good at one particular little thing. But if you're trying to innovate and change the world, you're not going to see other possibilities, which is why the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary is so critical. Like Alina said in her video, talk to different people, network, just get different points of view and everything. That's probably one of the most critical things and whatnot. So that being said, yes, I started as a physicist. My undergrad research was as physicky as physics can get. It was all string theory and general relativities, black holes, and all this other groovy stuff. And then for a variety of reasons, when I made it to Clark, I ended up getting tossed headfirst into biophysics. Part of that was the math from that level of string theory and general relativity. You need that to be able to calculate fluid flows and curvatures of cells and how they interact and all this other groovy stuff. And then also I had a very long computer programming history. So with Professor Mukhopadhyay, who I believe is still there and doing fantastically, we started simulating things, how vancomycin disrupts gram-negative cells to essentially cause leasing of the membrane, how red blood cells can change their shape to cause various genetic disorders and whatnot. And then all the way to how humans can go blind by bad protein interactions between cells in the rods in the human eye. So all sorts of, really nifty stuff. And as this happened, my interest in biology grew and grew and grew. Here was a really challenging system, right? Physicists joke that we can solve any problem as long as it's a spherical cow in a vacuum, right? But pulling that to the real world, it's useless. I guess there's spherical cows if you get them fat enough. I don't know, right? But a biological system is really interesting because now your phase space, there's so many variables, so many dimensions, so much stuff is going on. How do you make sense of any of it? And then how do you model it so then we can, make better medicines, prevent diseases, all this really fun stuff. So to skip over kind of the boring part of the story, I did a PhD at postdoc where we'd used computing clusters to model active transport via processive and non-processive motors in the cells. And then just kind of got sick of academia, leapt from the ivory tower, and I was introduced to the problem of searching and making sense out of DNA, particularly off a DNA sequencer, where, with 100 times coverage, you end up with 300 gigabytes of data, and it's all these little pieces, so you don't even have the full picture. How do you make sense of that? Which way's up, left, right, and whatnot? From that, we came up with some very unique bioinformatic algorithms that landed us a few patents, and a company formed from that. And we created these tools, gene editing tools that could actually figure out off-target interactions for a given gene editing design for CRISPR or any of the other ones. And then we could do the inverse. You could actually tell us, hey, we want to change this part of a coding region, and we could do the math for you and come up with the best design to ensure you have no off-target interactions, things of that sort. For people who aren't 1,000% up to speed with gene editing, the idea of an off-target interaction is you send in your gene edit and it binds somewhere you don't want it to bind. And now maybe you've just turned off a critical protein or you've caused a mutation that leads to cancer or something like that. So, getting these things very precise is critical. And, from that, we rounded up a bunch of customers. We helped with a whole bunch of stuff, everything from editing white blood cells, the T cells, to reprogram immune systems to go after cancerous cells, to gene editing viral reservoirs for HPV and other things of that sort. And then in the past few years, we've decided to start using the tools for ourselves. If we truly have the world's best, hammer and saw and everything else, why don't we use it? And then through some networking connections, we're introducing to plants. So bioagro is fascinating right now. There's so many things that can be done, But even companies like Monsanto and whatnot haven't really transitioned to use modern gene editing techniques and whatnot. They're still kind of relying on older quasi spaghetti on the wall things. So for smaller startups who are interested in that, there's an incredible amount of stuff that can be done, and especially with the emerging cannabis field, especially if you put the recreational side using THC aside. The other 129 cannabinoids that the plant makes all have medicinal uses. So if you can find out ways to get rid of the psychotrope and then boost the other ones, there's a lot of opportunities there. And then you can imagine even carrying that over into other plants. I joke, what if you could get corn to grow like cabbage, right? So now instead of the stalk going up and you have to wait for the cobs to come out of it, what if the cob just grows right out of the ground? Now you can produce food with less water, faster, more efficient. You can imagine making the cob longer, more little kernels, things like that. So yeah, that's my story basically. Happy to come back around, but I'll hand it back over to a professor.
It's really fascinating. I mean, it almost sounds like science fiction, right? But the future is now. So this is what we want you all to take advantage of. Again, I'll throw it out there. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. So we've heard about a couple different paths. So not sort of the traditional path you might be considering, as you're taking biochemistry or whatever. But again, there are many ways to move forward. I'm going to throw out a question to the panelists. Are there certain skills that might be a little less obvious? So not just understanding biochemistry or the science, but other of these, maybe you can speak a little to some of the soft skills that you think are useful for a person to pick up along the way as they're developing their career.
Sure, I'll take that. Hello, Rochelle. So I'll just say that when I was interviewing for the product management role at Millipore Sigma, and at that point I had been a career scientist the majority of my life. I mean, that's all I've done. PhD. I did research at Clark. I did. I worked at a startup company. The thing that they looked most for, they didn't care about my scientific credentials, my expertise. What they cared about was my ability to relate with other people, my ability to work, in a outside the box, be able to think outside the box. And they didn't want someone who was very senior, who was like, if I had been a scientist in industry for 20 years, they would never hire me. The reason why is because at that point, the mentality is fixed, and it would be very challenging to overcome some of those tendencies. Like, some of the stigmas that come with being a scientist are, you're, OCD, or, you have to do things a certain way. Everything is black and white. It's either your hypothesis is right or it's wrong, and you're not able to operate in the gray areas. And that's one of those skills that, that really I was able to develop prior to my scientific career, I would say. And that was by working in a retail environment. And, so I credit some of those skills, to those opportunities that I had earlier on in life.
To jump on what Zoo was saying, I agree 100%. And I would just append, as Zoo mentioned that, as you get older, you tend to become, rigid in your thinking, the same ways worked 1,000 times. I would encourage people to always be able to fight that, remain plastic. No matter what science you learn, if it's physics, chemistry, biochem, any of them, the fundamental principles are all the same. And it's basically looking at a situation and being able to be self-critical. Can you realize when something's wrong and fix it? And a big part of that is your thinking wrong, right? And then can you redo it? If you're able to hang on to that, then that aging anti-plasticity Zoo was talking about, you'll do fantastically. Yep.
And hearing this reminds, oh, sorry, Alina, I'll let you jump in. But just hearing this reminds me, when I was a graduate student, I had one of my professors was a very prominent scientist, and he told me he always preferred having undergrads in the lab versus graduate students because the undergrads were not confined in their thinking. They didn't know what wasn't possible. And so they brought a lot more creativity and new ideas to the projects. So having that open-mindedness, I think, being young as all of you are, certainly compared to me, you have that, you still have that. So as Kringle just said, try to keep that for as long as you can, because it's very important in science, in everything, but particularly in science. Okay, Lena.
Thank you. So I wanted to say I agree with everyone, and also I wanted to mention that I've had a bit of an unconventional path to where I am now, kind of the opposite, almost maybe of Zeus' story, perhaps. I took a really long break between high school and college. After high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and instead of going to school, staying in school, and just doing it anyway with the hopes that I'll figure it out along the way, I ended up just cooking. And I worked in kitchens for a long time, many years. And one thing that also is true for kitchens is that they don't want somebody who knows it all. They have a term for it in the kitchen. It's called green. They want to hire people who are green, like, little sprouts, so that they can mold them into what they would like them to be for their particular kitchen. And now that I am where I am now, I wanted to say that, while on the job, I'm always looking for new hard skills to learn. But it really depends on the job at hand. And I think the opportunities to learn those skills will always be available in the lab setting, and they will change with the project. So it's good not to worry about not knowing everything. And it's really those soft skills that like maintaining your curiosity about discovery, maintaining your flexibility and patience, especially, when things don't go to plan or your results don't add up. And also like nurturing your active willingness to learn, which is something that we're learning while in school right now. That's really important. But one skill that I think is maybe in between soft and hard that I think is really important that you can gain right now before even going into the workforce is your ability to be organized and manage time. That's going to be very important when you get a job, being able to keep a detailed lab notebook and just being able to thoughtfully plan your time and experiments, I think is something you can start thinking about now. That's all.
Just a quick note on the time, because Alina, I definitely agree with you on that one. A piece of advice from something I learned the hard way: when you first start out managing your time, if in your head you think it's going to take you 20 minutes, multiply by 6. Yeah.
Good advice. All right. Well, it's kind of like pulling teeth here, trying to get some questions out of you. But
we have some questions actually that have come into the chat. So
okay, great. Why don't you go ahead, Rosie?
Great. So first, we have a question that's for the broader panel that I'll pose, and I think it's a question that we'd all love to hear. But first, before we move too far off the topic, I will ask the question. This one's for you, Zoo. Since you have a PhD in research, how do you see your research experience and PhD helping in your current role?
Well, so it's a little bit on the research side, because I cater to researchers at our organization. We're a life sciences incubator. Whatever challenges they face, in many ways, I've faced them previously in my previous life, whether it's inside the lab, whether it's a facilities issue, whether it's an investment issue, so a lot of those issues, it's easier for me to relate with my clients because I've been in their shoes before. So that's really where it is, where it sits. But, I also sit on some advisory boards, where we help our companies achieve their next milestone. So a lot of my tenants, as Kringle knows, will just pop into my office. So multitasking is basically the story of my life. I feel like I have ADHD on every single day I come to work, because it's rare that I could sit on my computer for 2 hours and do a task without interruption. So I think one of the additional things in terms of time management is that, so I keep a detailed log of things that I need to do over the course of a day. And I always check off the box by the end of the day, or at least I try to. But, in terms of like the response, being able to respond to clients, I never spend more than, I never wait longer than 24 hours, to write a response, an email response, to return a phone call or anything like that. So that helps with the organizational side.
Great. And so we had a question that's actually coming from one of my colleagues here in the Career Connections Center. So it's a great question. And it is, So from each of your perspective, and thank you, Zoo, for putting in some answers that maybe we can mention to everyone. What are some of your suggestions for first internships? What are some topics? What are some places where students can look? What are some companies that students can consider for those that are looking to get that experience on their resume?
Yeah, so I'll start off. I'll just say, so I sent the link to the Mass Life Science Center on the internship challenge. I think that's a pretty good program. It's going to match the employer with the prospective intern. And, those are opportunities that, it just makes it easier on the employer to kind of because that program will kind of pre-screen and make that match for the employer on behalf of the employer. I mean, the other way is obviously through word of mouth. Like if you know somebody who's a friend or is working at a company that you're interested in, you should always take advantage of those opportunities. But in lieu of that, I would definitely go through the MLSC challenge.
I would add that don't be scared to kick doors down either. A funny little story, an intern I had years ago who was doing a bunch of saltwater reef coral stuff for me and whatnot. After she was done with my internship, she was graduating from college and she heard about a clownfish hatchery basically down the street from her school. And she literally I'm not saying you should do this, but she literally snuck in through the loading dock, found the CEO and asked them if they were hiring, right? Turned out they were. He was about to post a job and instead just gave it to her right there on the spot. Now that's probably a little extreme, but at the same time, I mean, look up the companies in Worcester or near where you're going to be for the summer or the winter or whatnot, and just walk in and ask them. Especially where now there's, maybe to Zoo's approach with the Mass Life Science Center internship challenge and the other boards. If there's 100 people applying and you're the only one who walked in and actually introduced them, I mean, that gives you a leg and an arm up. So, and the other thing too is if they're not registered with the Mass Life Science Center for the internship challenge, they can decide they want to hire you as an intern and then get set up for the challenge the next day. So then you become a free intern. So you can always advertise that as well.
And something else that I would add to that is, one, write a cover letter, a general cover letter, and have your resume ready. And then something that I've been doing now, because I'm also looking to expand my experience, especially this coming summer, I made a list, like Kringle said, of all of the companies that I'm willing to drive to. In Worcester, I also went out to Boston and everywhere in between. I made a list of them, and then I went to each of their websites and I checked their career opportunities. And every company, AbbVie, all of them, they have a section on their website where it will tell you what they're hiring for now, and check it weekly at least, because they get updated, and right now they might not have an internship available, but it will come up later. And then cater your cover letter and your resume to each company and send it out. And then, like Kringle says, go and kick that door and just do it. Keep doing it. It's not going to seem like too much. Throw a bunch of balloons out in all directions and maybe one will land, but you have a better chance of landing one that way. So that's my advice.
That's a really good point, Alina, that I hadn't thought of, is bother them, right? Because you're not bothering them. They're very, very busy. And it sounds weird, but by bothering them, you're making this easier for them. Because now at some point they're going to go, you know what? They keep showing up. I'll just hire them. And now I don't have to go through that stack of 100 other people. And I know it might be early, but LinkedIn's actually great for this, right? As you can start building your network, that company you're interested in that you've looked up and whatnot, just type it into LinkedIn and see if you have a first or a second connection to someone in that company. Because then if you can talk to them directly, it just makes the process move smoother.
I think this is all great advice. One thing I'm hearing from all of you is you have to be proactive in doing this. It's not going to fall in your lap. So, in some sense, the onus is on you, but you're not alone in this. There are lots of resources available to help you, including, like the places that Zoo and Kringle referred to, but also right here on campus through the Career Connections Center. And we have Michelle Flint on this call. We have Rosie Gallant from this office. They're there to help you. So bother them, seek them out for, what opportunities they might be aware of, in addition to doing your own research, as Nina just nicely outlined, right? I think that's a great strategy, is where are you willing to go and what opportunities are within that perimeter. So I think this is really great advice, but it's going to be up to you to act on that advice. And so hopefully we just hope, in hosting this event, that the intent is to alert you to the great opportunities that are right here in our backyard, right here in Worcester. It's really a booming place for biotech. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And it'd be a shame for you not to know about it and not to take advantage of it. Rosie, any other questions coming in on the chat?
There are not any other questions, but there are some great resources that Michelle's been posting. So we'll make sure that we have it up. There's a question right here. Go ahead.
So for those that have experience with academic research, do you feel like breaking into the industry gave you a kind of a boost of creativity? Just because from my experience with academic research, it's kind of very much so structured. I was wondering if you kind of gained the insight through that.
I would say that when I transitioned from academia to industry, my role, because it was in a startup company, I had to bring a lot more creativity to the table. There wasn't kind of defined SOPs. There wasn't defined methods. We knew what we wanted to do, which was to try to develop this product and bring it to the patients, but we didn't know how to do it. So we pretty much did everything we could and really thought outside the box. Now, there's a big difference between a startup company and going to a large pharma company. When you go to a large pharma company, sometimes you could be more of a cog in the wheel, and you're expected to do specific defined SOPs. So in some ways, it kind of reduces the creativity as compared to academia, where you have the ability to think freely and come up with a proposal that may have a scientific merit. In large pharma, that thinking is a little bit different because it has to be able to hit the bottom line, which is profits.
Yeah, I think too, it depends on your own personal type of creativity, right? Like Zoo was saying, the small companies, that's the Wild West, right? So if your type of creativity is the rules haven't been created yet and you're willing to just go wild and see what you can come up with, that's fantastic, right? In a larger biotech, a structured company where there's a lot of rules, it's almost more like playing Monopoly, right? You've got some set rules, but if you're the type that likes to be creative with set rules and see what you can come up with, and I hate to say it this way, get away with it, that could be appealing to someone like that. And academia is, if you're small and large, academia is sort of in the middle and over here. So it depends on your lab and its size and whatnot. So yeah, that'd be my vote. Figure out what type of creativity you like, and then run in that direction.
And I guess to that, I would add that the power of internship right now is your ability to find out, maybe to test those waters out. You can try, right now is your time to try out all of those things if you can, to see what feels better to you.
That's a very good point, Alina.
We have another great question, Dennis, that came in the chat. Would you like me to ask it?
Sure.
So we're actually, would you like to unmute and ask your question, Taylor?
Hi. My question is, many entry-level scientist jobs in biotech still require like 1 or 2 years of industry experience, or at least that's what it says in the job descriptions. So how important do you think that is for landing your first job? Like if you haven't had an internship in biotech, but maybe you've had academic research experience.
So critical thing about job descriptions, they're more like an Amazon wish list than hard requirements, right? So a lot of those are wiggly and fuzzy. I would almost go back to what I said a second ago, where in a large company, actually, as I say that, it could go either way, right? I was going to say in a large company, they might be strict about that. They want 1 or 2 years of experience. Whereas a small company, for example, one incubating at MBI, they probably don't care because they're going to work one-on-one with you and get you right up to speed.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Kringle. So the only thing I would just say is it really depends on the level. If you're looking at entry-level scientist positions, I don't think anyone's expecting you to have, any significant industry experience when you come to an entry-level job, in any field, but particularly in science. And I just think that, what's more important is the attitude that you bring to the job. It's not what you bring, what you know. It's your ability and your desire to want to execute that job. I think that's going to be more important.
I think Alina has the right attitude on this one with her kicking down doors thing, right? Just apply for it, go for it. If you like the job as overall, and you don't have the 1 or 2 years or one other thing, just apply, see what happens. Come up with a creative cover letter, customize your resume like Alina was saying, and just go for it.
Thanks.
I actually have a good example. Before I even decided to go back to school studying biology, I didn't have any degree, nothing, just some cooking experience and like quite a few different jobs. But I applied for this job at Eppendorf that required a bachelor's degree with multiple years of, experience. And I said, I'm going to do it anyway. And I wrote my application, and I went with this crazy attitude of, look, just give me a chance. I can do this, I think. And I got hired. And even the hiring manager afterwards was like, this is not typical, but you really didn't want to give up. So I think that attitude, like Zoo said, is huge, like say 70%, although, I'm just throwing percents out numbers, but it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that's really useful about these internships is they can be kind of a stepping stone to get around that 1 to 2 year, experience, right? You might get an internship as an undergrad that might translate into a full-time job after you graduate. So it's another good reason to seek these internship opportunities out as early as you can. You don't have to be a senior to do this, right? Certainly the sooner the better in most cases anyways. Any more questions, Rosie?
We have a question.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah,
or a hand up from Colin Sterling.
All right, Colin.
Hi everyone. So just to add to that, don't be afraid at all. I did 2 summer academic internships. I had a bit of experience working in an incubator when I got my master's. It had nothing to do with my undergrad experience. My undergrad experience was cancer research. The incubator experience I had was developing organic flame retardants. I'm looking to move back to the Massachusetts area, and there was a job at one of George Church's startups that required 2 years experience. And I said, you know what? I'm not about the whole 2-year experience thing, because I only had a year or so in academic research and then like 6 months in an incubator. So I said, that's not really 2 months, 2 years, sorry. So I applied anyway. I got an interview. So don't be afraid at all about the 2-year. Obviously if it says 5+ years, you might not want to go down that way. But like if it says 1 to 2 years, don't be afraid, and really embrace incubators. Even though, they're a little small and not as big as like say Lonza or like AstraZeneca or one of the big names, but incubators really can help you not only develop the scientific skills that you need, but also a lot of the business skills that you need. Like I did market research. I didn't know a thing about market research, but it can really help you develop the skills that you need to transition into those companies. So just to add to that. And it's good to be kind of virtually back at Clark. I'm not there physically, but it's good to be back virtually.
It's great to see you, Colin, and thanks for that. Okay, Maddie, you have a question.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to ask about where we've been talking about soft skills and how if you're going to apply and just kick down the door and just apply to something, even if you might not have all the research that and experience they're asking for, how would you suggest kind of bringing up the soft skills that you bring? Would that be kind of in the cover letter, or how can I set myself apart and say, okay, well, I might not have as much experience, but I bring these other soft skills to the table?
Go ahead, Kringle.
I was going to say that's $1 million question right there. If I had a solid answer for that, I'd be advertising on daytime television, right? Colin mentioned market research. You essentially have to do market research, right? The company you're interested in applying to, look them up. What are they doing? How do they, I hate to say advertise, but what do they do on the side? What pieces are they missing? And are there any overlaps with soft skills you have? Yeah, that'd be my vote.
Also, I don't know if this is cliche, and maybe some of the more experienced people can correct me, but I think that it's good to include things like let them know that you're a quick learner, that you're confident in your ability to learn, you're confident in you're organized. Let them know that, try to convey a willingness to learn, an open-mindedness, your ability to work on a team while also valuing independence. I know that sounds cliche, but I think those are important things. And if you can find a unique way to put them into a resume or a cover letter, I think that can be, you can communicate that, at least part of it, across.
Thank you.
Hey, Maddie, the only thing I would just add is just that I would say that, in addition to what Alina said, highlighting certain things, you also don't want to go overboard. I think, many people, when we had to hire for my team, we would read the cover letters. We don't really read anything. We scan it very briefly, and, a person's personality really comes through in their writing, so you can pretty much tell within the first few sentences, what that type of personality they have, if they're going to be a team player, based on how they write things in a certain way. So that's kind of how we evaluated, people on paper. But when you talk with someone, you can tell immediately if they're going to be the type of person who's going to be able to work with you or against you. So.
Thank you.
And actually, just to add a quick side note onto what Zoo was saying, that's equally as important. Is if your personality is not going to meld well with a company, you don't want to force your way in there. So what Zoo was saying about how they can quickly tell if someone's going to fit on their team or not, as much as it's kind of, oh man, I would have loved that job, it might be better for you in the long run, because if personalities on the team aren't going to sync, that's not worth it for you.
That's great. I mean, so many of these things are about fit, and that fit goes both ways, right? Just like Kringle was saying. That's a really good point. We're coming towards the end of our time here, so it's not too late for that last minute question if you have one. In the meantime, while you're thinking that up, I'd like to hear from the panelists just quickly. Now that you've been out for a while, is there something you wish you knew then that you know now about that you would find useful? Like what one piece of advice, other than the great advice you've already shared this afternoon with everybody?
Me personally, I probably wish I, did some job exploring prior to taking jobs, because it took me a while to realize that I didn't want to stay in the lab forever. It took me longer than most. So PhD, postdoc, 4 years of being in a startup company, and then I finally realized, oh, well, maybe this isn't the career path for me. But I probably could have figured it out a lot earlier had I taken internship opportunities in large pharma, maybe in a startup company. I could have figured out where where my path, it would have been more of a straight line. But with that said, I never would have gotten the experience or, the enrichment through that process. So I certainly don't look back on it and say, I could have done things differently.
I don't know if I have anything in particular other than just, really know yourself and be yourself. If something feels wrong, don't go that way. The universe, the higher powers, the insert whichever data you believe in, always seems to have a way of things working out, even though in the immediate it might not seem that way. But, as my grandmother used to say, in the end, you only have yourself. So, take care of you first and then listen to yourself. Yeah.
Great advice. Yes, Taylor, you're right. Okay, last chance. The clock is ticking. Any other last minute questions anybody wants to ask? This is your opportunity. Of course, the folks in the Career Connection Center will still be around. I'll still be around. So feel free to reach out to any of us if we can help you in your journey